My name's Aaron. I'm 33, freelance for a living, and I hike to get out of my own head. So when I finally had a free weekend in July of 2020, I did something that felt almost rebellious. I left my laptop at home and drove out to a quiet section of the Appalachian Trail in North Carolina. It was supposed to be a short hike, just one night and distance enough to feel unplugged. I brought my dog, Ranger, mostly for peace of mind. He isn't huge, but he's alert, loud when he needs to be, always seems to notice things before I do. Even at home, he reacts to sounds I don't hear until he's already decided they matter. The hike-in couldn't have been better. Warm air, the sunlight breaking through the trees, that deep green that makes you forget about inboxes and deadlines. Ranger stayed close, sniffing everything, stopping to stare down squirrels every now and then. The campsite itself felt ordinary in the best way. Flat ground, decent spacing between trees, far enough from the trail to feel private. No trash. No signs of anyone nearby. I set up my tent, laid out my sleeping bag, keys clipped, headlamp placed where I could grab it fast, water bottle by the door. Ranger paced the edge of the clearing while I cooked one of those dehydrated meals that never taste like the picture on the package. I ate sitting on a rock, watching the light fade, enjoying the quiet. Then Ranger stopped pacing. He walked to the far side of the campsite and stared into the tree line. Not the side with the trail, the opposite direction. Thick brush, no clear path. Then he started growling, low and continuous, like a warning or something. I laughed at first. "It's probably a deer," I said, mostly to hear my own voice. "Or a raccoon." He didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I stood and looked where he was looking, but nothing moved. There was no rustling, no reflective eyes, just trees and shadow. I tugged lightly on his leash, trying to redirect him. He leaned forward, resisting in a way that surprised me. Ranger isn't aggressive. He's cautious, but he's never locked onto nothing like that before. I sat back down and tried to eat, but the growling didn't stop. After a few minutes, it stopped being funny. Then it stopped being harmless. It started to feel wrong. I offered him a treat. He ignored it. That got my attention. Ranger doesn't ignore treats. He would eat during a thunderstorm. The light drained completely, and the campsite changed into that version of itself that feels smaller at night. My headlamp beam barely reached the trees Ranger was staring at. "Okay," I muttered. "What is it?" He didn't even look at me. He just kept the same focus and the same tension in his body. I finally decided to call it a night. I pulled him toward the tent. He came, but kept looking back like he didn't want me turning my back on the woods. Inside the tent, Ranger sat near the opening facing out. I changed clothes, brushed my teeth, scrolled my phone until the signal disappeared. When I shut the screen off, I realized he was still growling. I whispered his name. His body stiffened. Then he lunged. The leash snapped tight, yanking the tent, and he started barking, angry. I flipped on my headlamp and shoved the zipper down. The beam hit the trees. At first, all I saw were trunks and shadow. Then something moved, fast and close. A face ducked behind a tree, human, pale, near enough that it shouldn't have been. My whole body went hot. I dragged Ranger back inside and zipped the tent shut so fast the zipper snagged. My hands felt clumsy, unreliable. I sat there, listening. No footsteps running away. No voice. No apology. Just silence. Thick and terrifying. Ranger pressed against my leg, shaking. Then something hit the ground outside. A rock. Not rolling in from the edge, landing inside the clearing where I'd been sitting earlier. Heavy enough to make a dull thud in the dirt. No voice followed it. No warning. Just that one sound. I didn't debate anymore. I shoved my feet into my shoes without thinking, clipped Ranger's leash to my wrist, grabbed my keys, and unzipped the tent. I didn't pack. I didn't think about what I was leaving behind. I moved fast, keeping my balance and pulling Ranger with me. And the entire time, I listened for pursuit. I expected branches snapping, footsteps, a voice calling out. I kept waiting for it, but thank God, nothing followed me. Still, I didn't stop until I reached the trail and then kept going until my legs felt weak. I found a spot where the trees thinned slightly and sat with my back against a trunk. Ranger pressed into my side, both of us watching the dark. When dawn finally came, I went back. I didn't want to, but my car was that way. The campsite looked almost normal in daylight. The tent was still standing. The cooking spot was undisturbed, but the ground told a different story. Bare footprints circled the tent, heavy enough to press deep into the dirt. One set stopped right beside the tent wall, exactly where my head would have been. There were no animal tracks, no signs of deer or raccoons. Just those footprints and the marks where Ranger had pulled against the leash. I packed quickly and left. On the drive home, I kept replaying the same details. The face behind the tree, the rock hitting dirt, the way the silence followed me. But the thing that stays with me the most is Ranger's growl, because he wasn't reacting to something approaching. He was reacting to someone who'd already been there, waiting for me to settle in and believe I was alone. I'm Claire, and I was 26 when I did my first long solo hike. I was proud of how prepared I felt. I had my route mapped, my pace measured, my breaks timed. I'm a grad student. I live inside schedules, spreadsheets, and long-term plans. I like knowing where I am in relation to where I'm going. That's part of why I wanted to do my first long solo hike. It felt like proof that I could handle myself without backup. The Tennessee-North Carolina border seemed like a good place to try. The weather was perfect. Cool, clear, that early spring air that makes you feel capable. I remember starting out with this quiet pride, like I was doing something right. That feeling didn't last long. About an hour in, I heard footsteps off to my right, just beyond the trail, soft crunching through leaves. I didn't stop. Trails are weird like that. Sound carries. It could have been an animal. It could have been another hiker cutting across switchbacks. I kept my pace and told myself not to overthink it. But then I noticed it never faded. I slowed a little. The footsteps slowed too. That got my attention. I stopped completely. The footsteps stopped instantly. I stood there for a moment, annoyed more than scared. Annoyed at myself for noticing. Annoyed that my brain immediately wanted to turn this into something bigger than it probably was. I started walking again. The footsteps started again at the exact same time. I thought it had to be echo. Terrain does that. Your own sounds bounce back at you. I'd read about it. I'd even experienced it before. Still, I did another test. I sped up. The footsteps sped up. I slowed down. They slowed down. I stopped again. Silence. Right there, that tight feeling hit. The rational thought started running out of space. But I kept going anyway. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to be the person who panics on their first solo hike and then has to explain it later like a joke that didn't land. So I walked, and whoever or whatever was off trail walked with me. Not 5 minutes, not 10, nearly an hour of it. The longer it went on, the harder it was to explain away. Animals don't match pace like that. People who want to pass you usually do. An echo doesn't stop the exact second you stop. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Broken branches at shoulder height, a scuffed patch of dirt where something heavy had moved, a bit of fabric snagged on a thorn. Every detail made it worse. Finally, I turned my head toward the trees and said, "Hey." I tried to keep my voice neutral, not to sound scared or aggressive. "Are you hiking too?" Nothing. No rustling, no answer. Not even an accidental noise. Silence felt like a decision. I waited a few seconds, then tried again. Louder. Still nothing. That's when my body stopped pretending this was normal. I didn't run. I know now that I should have, but in that moment, running felt like flipping a switch I couldn't turn back off. I told myself staying calm was smarter, staying steady, so I walked faster. The footsteps stayed with me. About 10 minutes later, the trail curved and opened into a small campsite area. It looked wrong immediately. The ground was torn up, a fire ring kicked apart, a crushed water bottle half buried in the dirt, and everything looked fresh. My first thought was that someone had been hurt. My second thought followed right after it, colder and clearer. Someone moved through here fast. Then it hit me. They were ahead of me now. I stood there. My heart was in my ears now, trying to decide what to do. Going forward meant stepping into whatever that campsite represented. Going back meant retracing the same stretch where I'd been followed. That's when I noticed the blowdown just off the trail. A fallen tree with thick branches piled up like a wall. It wasn't a perfect hiding spot, but it was something. I ducked behind it and crouched low, trying to make myself smaller. Every little sound felt huge. My breathing, the fabric of my jacket, the clink of the zipper. I waited. Then I heard footsteps on the trail itself. Not leaves, dirt. I peered through the branches. A man walked into view with nothing on him. No backpack, no water, no trekking poles, nothing that made sense. Just muddy jeans and a dark hoodie that looked too heavy for the temperature. In his right hand, he held a knife, loose and casual, like it belonged there. He walked like he knew exactly where he was going. As he drew closer to where I was hiding, he slowed a little. He turned his head, and he looked directly at me, directly at the spot where I was crouched. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then he kept walking, just continued down the trail like he'd confirmed something and no longer needed to linger. I stayed behind that fallen tree until my legs started to shake from holding still. I didn't move until the sound of his steps faded far enough that I couldn't tell which direction he'd gone. When I finally stood up, my body felt wrong, like my body hadn't caught up yet. I turned around and went back the way I came. Fast. Not running, but close enough that my pack bounced against my spine. I didn't see him again. That didn't make me feel better. I made it back to the trailhead and locked myself in my car. I sat there longer than I want to admit, trying to make sense of everything. The silence, the campsite, the way he looked at me like hiding was pointless. He didn't chase me. He didn't need to. He just wanted to see what I'd do once I understood I wasn't alone. My name's Lauren, and when 3 different local people told me not to stay at that shelter, I just assumed they were overreacting. That night, I was staying in a hostel, and as it was off-season, it was quiet. I remember someone casually asking where I planned to sleep that night. When I told them, the response wasn't panic, just a pause. Yeah, I wouldn't stay there alone. Another person said something similar 10 minutes later, but didn't give any more details. I'm an ER nurse. I deal with chaos for a living. One of the first things you learn is how often people exaggerate danger after the fact. Fear grows in the retelling. Out here, I figured stories probably did too. My legs were tired, the wind had picked up, the shelter fit my mileage perfectly. So I went anyway. The hike up felt emptier than it should have. There were no distant voices, just wind cutting through bare branches and the sound of my boots on dirt and rock. The temperature dropped fast once the light faded. When I reached the shelter, it looked normal. 3-sided wood structure, logbook, old fire ring, nothing about it screamed, "Don't sleep here." I unpacked, went through my routine. Sleeping pad down, shoes placed where I could reach them easily, headlamp close, bear spray clipped to my pack. No cell signal, but that wasn't unusual. I told myself the warnings were just trail folklore. Around midnight, the wind shifted and pushed straight into the open face of the shelter. Cold air rolled in hard enough to wake me. I was sitting up adjusting my bag when I saw a headlamp moving through the trees. Relief came first. Another hiker meant normalcy. He stepped into the shelter like he belonged there. He didn't greet me, didn't ask questions. He dropped his pack near mine instead of taking the far end and sat down. Trail etiquette says you give space. He didn't. "Long day?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "You hiking alone?" That wasn't a normal opening question. I answered vaguely. He smiled, but his eyes stayed flat. "So nobody expecting you tomorrow?" I looked at him then. "What?" He shrugged, "Just making conversation." He kept talking, questions stacking without pause. Where I was from, what I did, why I was hiking alone. Comments about my hair, about my body, framed like compliments. I shortened my answers. I turned my body to face the exit. He adjusted too, keeping himself in my space. "It's real quiet up here," he said. "No cars, no houses, no signal. If you yelled, it'd just echo." That's when my body stopped negotiating. People who aren't dangerous don't narrate isolation. I told him he should get some sleep. He laughed, like amused. "You don't need to be scared," he said. That sentence did the opposite of reassurance. I reached for my headlamp and turned it on. Light changes behavior. It makes people feel observed. He didn't like it. His posture tightened. "You picked a bad place to be alone," he said. I didn't respond. I was already calculating. If I left, the trail down was steep, icy, pitch black. One fall, and I'd be injured with him behind me. If I stayed, I was trapped in a 3-sided box. Then he said it, casual as a fact. "I've been watching you since before dark." He didn't touch me. That's the part people don't understand later. He stayed just short of contact and used words instead. Quiet. Specific. Like he'd planned it. How long he'd waited. How he knew someone would come through alone. How easy it would be for me to leave early. Or not leave at all. He framed it as inevitability. So at that moment, I decided to lie. I relaxed my shoulders, lowered my eyes, softened my voice. "I'm not scared," I said. His body responded instantly. Satisfaction. He leaned back like he'd won something. "See," he said. "That's better." I asked him a harmless question, something that made him move a little away from the exit. He didn't even notice. The moment the space opened, I grabbed my pack and ran. I slipped immediately. Hit the ground hard, knee, hip, breath knocked out of me. Pain flared white and sharp. Behind me, he laughed. Not chasing yet, just confident. "You won't get far," he said. I got up anyway, cut off the trail into brush, dragging myself over roots and dead leaves until I found dense cover and pressed myself into the ground. I stayed there for hours. Sometimes I heard movement, sometimes nothing. I couldn't tell which was worse. I controlled my breathing the way I do with panicking patients. Slow, shallow, silent. When the sky finally lightened, I crawled out. My knee was swollen and bleeding. My hands were torn up. I limped back toward the shelter, hoping my pack would still be there. That was my food, my filter, my wallet, everything. The shelter was empty. My pack was gone. So was my food. I stood there staring at the place I'd slept, and the final piece settled into place. He hadn't wandered in. He knew that shelter. He knew the timing. He knew the kind of person who hears a warning and still goes because they don't want to live afraid. And the worst part wasn't that he could have hurt me. It was that he never had to touch me to prove he could take whatever he wanted. I wasn't new to the woods when this happened. I wasn't reckless either. Back then, I worked as a trail guide and outdoor educator, environmental studies degree, seasonal work, long stretches living outside more than inside. I'd camped alone more times than I could count, especially near Mac's Patch. I knew the area well enough that my body relaxed the second my boots hit dirt. That was part of the problem. I liked camping solo because the quiet felt honest. No phones, no conversations, just the woods doing what they do. That night, the woods weren't doing anything at all. I got to my spot in the late afternoon, right as the temperature started dropping fast. First real cold snap of the season. Leaves mostly down, sky flat and pale like it had been scrubbed clean. I set up where I always did, just off trail, out of sight but not stupidly far. Dinner was uneventful. Food hung, gear laid out in the same places I always put it. Headlamp, boots, pack. My hands moved on autopilot. By around 10:30, everything shut down. No insects, no wind, no small animal noise. Even the trees were still. I remember noticing the silence because it felt wrong. Then I heard whistling. 3 notes, not musical or playful, just 3 clean tones, evenly spaced. My first thought was another hiker. Mac's Patch attracts all kinds of people. Some stay out later than they should, so I waited for footsteps, but there was nothing. The whistle came again. Same 3 notes. I stood there listening and trying to place distance and direction. The sound carried too well for how still the air was. Without thinking it through, I whistled back. Same 3 notes. The sound stopped instantly. I stood there feeling mildly embarrassed, waiting for a laugh or a comment, something human. But nothing happened. About 30 seconds later, the whistle started again. Closer this time. Not in a spooky way, in a physical way. Like there was less space between the sound and my ears. I turned my headlamp on and scanned the tree line. Trunks, brush, empty ground. No movement, no reflected light. Then the whistle came again, from behind me. I turned too fast, caught my heel, and dropped to one knee. I swore under my breath, got back up and told myself someone was messing around, but the silence didn't match that explanation. I shut my headlamp off and listened. The whistle came again, this time from my left. Then, less than a second later, from my right. 2 distinct sources, perfectly matched. That's when I noticed something else. At that moment, I had a growing sense that whatever this was didn't fit inside any category I knew how to handle. So I started packing, just fast. Tent shoved, sleeping bag jammed. I didn't even bother rehanging my food properly. I just wanted to be moving. I started hiking out in the dark, something I normally never do unless there's an emergency. The trail felt wrong almost immediately, and then the whistling stopped. Complete silence. I didn't turn around. I started moving faster. The trail stretched in ways it shouldn't have. Turns took too long. Landmarks didn't show up when they were supposed to. The edge of my headlamp beam felt thin, like the dark was pressing inward. Then the trail opened into a clearing I didn't recognize. In the center stood a tree. Carved into the tree were 3 shallow cuts. I backed out of that clearing slowly, without turning my back. My feet found the trail like muscle memory took over. I kept hiking until the sky lightened just enough to tell me morning was coming. When I reached a gravel road, I didn't feel safe, just less alone. A ranger truck showed up not long after. He took one look at me, muddy, torn hands, pack half open, and asked if I was okay. I tried to explain it like a report. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he asked one question. "Did you whistle back?" I nodded. His posture changed immediately. "All right," he said. "You're done out here tonight." I tried to ask more. He shook his head once. "Don't talk about it on trail." Not advice, instruction. I didn't argue. I still hike, I still teach, I still spend time in the woods, but I don't camp alone anymore, because the last thing I learned out there wasn't about weather or navigation. It was this. Some things just want you to be brave. I was doing a short winter section in Georgia. Nothing extreme. 2 nights out, clear forecast, cold snap moving through. The kind of trip where you reset your head and remind yourself how quiet the world can be when you step away from it. By late afternoon, I found a decent place to camp. Off the trail, but close enough to water that I wouldn't need to move much after dark. I had just started setting up when I heard voices. A group came through. 4 people, maybe 5, spread out, moving with purpose. They didn't sound relaxed. No laughing, no joking, no casual trail chatter. Just low voices and short sentences like they were conserving energy or sound. They passed my spot and set up camp about 100 yards away. I could hear them moving around, but again, it was restrained. Headlamps flicked on and off quickly. No music, no clanking cookware. At first, I shrugged it off. Everyone hikes differently, but as night settled in, the tension started to stand out. Whenever one person spoke, the others went quiet immediately. Not annoyed quiet, alert quiet, like they were listening for something outside the circle. And no one ever said the obvious things people usually say at night in the woods. No, "Did you hear that?" No nervous jokes, no reassurance. It felt like they'd already agreed something was wrong and didn't need to say it out loud. I crawled into my tent early, the cold biting harder than I expected. The woods were doing their normal nighttime thing, branches shifting, something small moving through leaves, wind moving in uneven waves. but their camp stayed almost completely silent. Just after midnight, I heard a zipper, then another, then footsteps. Not wandering footsteps, not someone half asleep, stepping out to relieve themselves. Purposeful movement. I sat up and cracked my tent door just enough to see through the mesh. Their camp was dim, but I could make out shapes moving quickly. Headlamps blinked on and off, never staying on long enough to light the area. Then I heard something that pulled me fully awake. A whispered countdown. Not loud enough to catch every word, but rhythmic, like they were coordinating something they'd rehearsed. Within minutes, they were gone. No arguments, no questions. No, did you grab the stove? Just quiet motion, and then nothing. If you've spent time outdoors, you know the difference between people leaving and people fleeing. This was fleeing. And what unsettled me most was how clean it was. No hesitation, no confusion, like the decision had been made long before they packed up. I didn't sleep after that. At first light, I made coffee with shaking hands and told myself I'd walk past their campsite before heading out. Not because I wanted trouble, because I needed confirmation that I hadn't imagined the whole thing. When I reached the site, my first thought was that it looked staged. Gear was everywhere. A tent half collapsed, packs lying open, trekking poles still planted in the ground, a jacket that looked too expensive to abandon tossed near a tree. The kind of equipment people don't leave behind unless something else matters more. I crouched near the edge and looked at the ground. Footprints overlapped chaotically, heading in multiple directions. Some went back toward the trail, others cut deeper into the woods. That didn't make sense. If you're scared, you move toward the trail, toward the known route, unless you're trying to avoid something on it. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, someone walking without concern for noise. I turned and saw a man about 20 feet away. No pack, no hiking gear, muddy jeans, dark jacket. He was crouched over one of the bags, moving through it calmly. What he was doing wasn't frantic. He wasn't stealing. He was sorting. He pulled out a wallet, set it aside, a key ring, a small pouch that looked like it held cards or IDs. Anything personal went into a neat pile. He was removing names. I took a slow step back, trying not to shift the moment. But that's when he looked up. He met my eyes and said evenly, like he was stating a fact, "You shouldn't be here today." He stood, wiped his hands on his jeans, and looked past me toward the trail, like he was checking something behind my shoulder. Then he stepped off the trail, toward the direction the group had fled. As if his business wasn't finished, I waited until he disappeared into the trees. Then I packed up faster than I ever had. There was no sitting around to think it through. I just left. The entire hike out, I kept expecting footsteps behind me, because that's what the situation felt built around. Not speed, but control. When I got reception, I reported it. Abandoned gear, a man going through it. I stuck to facts, left out the countdown, left out the way his voice had sounded like a warning meant for someone who didn't belong. Say too much, people stop listening. Say too little, and you regret it later. I split the difference. They said they'd look into it. Maybe they did. I don't know. All I know is that they didn't leave because something broke. They left because someone found them. And afterwards, someone stayed behind, not to steal their gear, but to erase who they were. Like the equipment didn't matter, like the people did. And I was only safe because I showed up late, on a day I shouldn't have been there. If these stories made you double-check your surroundings instead of your phone, go ahead. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next nightmare, and tell me which story messed with you the most. And if gas stations feel harmless because they're familiar, click now for 4 really creepy gas station stories. Routine is exactly what makes it dangerous. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.